David, Joel in the middle. Yeah, this is all, I think we've migrated. But we've got David Wenger, Henry Bowl at the end, and we've got Joel Sherlock in the middle. Gentlemen, just give them a quick outline of yourselves.
Sure. Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Hope everyone's still awake after lunch. I'm David Wenger. I'm the Chief Global Initiatives Officer for the Bang Corporation, one of the keynote sponsors of the event. I hope everybody has a chance to come to our party tonight at the Space Monkey. I've been investing in the industry, cannabis industry, since 2016. I started investing in Canada and then invested in the United States early on in some of the now leading multi-state operators. Recently, I started shifting some of my investment focus from multi-state cannabis operators to brands. And one of the companies that I invested in is Bang. And I've gotten to know the team more and more, and now I've joined as an officer.
Great. Yep, Joel.
Yeah, my name is Joel Sherlock. So we've been invested, starting on the private equity side in the Canadian space since 2011. Started as very generalists and worn a lot of the big names very early on, so it's been a good market to us. Had a focus in the U.S. for the last couple of years, and now really focused on European opportunities here, and really narrowed down our scope into our investment ecosystem, if you will.
Yeah, my name is Henry Bohl. I'm working from Frankfurt. We control a small family office. We actually have not invested into CBDs and cannabis companies yet, but the main reason why I'm here is to look at opportunities and potential for such companies in the next 1 or 2 years. But I could also make a very short-term investment if there are some interesting deals right now here.
Very good. So you guys see we've got a really diverse group on the panel. Investors basically rooted in Europe, Canada, and the US, but all of them investing globally. That's where the market is right now. And all of them touching both private and public companies. So really interesting viewpoints. Jumping right in, as we sit in Switzerland, some of the other panels discuss the differences with the EU and the flexibility that actually lends to Swiss, but really jumping in, what are the primary differences in raising funds right now in Europe versus North America? We're going to start with Joel.
Our first funds were mainly backed by our capital and then Canadians. But most of our experience on the public markets in the early days was actually selling things that we built to publicly traded companies. The biggest difference I see when you look at like the AIM or the Next or some of the markets over here, the barrier to entry and just the diligence required over here is quite a bit higher than maybe the venture or the CSE in the Canadian landscape where most of the cannabis companies sit now. So there'll be a lot more questions, a lot more diligence, and a lot more requirements just around reporting, business plans, kind of basically all the things we should have in Canada sometimes that we have.
Essentially more mature from the jump. David?
Yeah, I think the maturity aspect is very important. I think looking at where the U.S. was a couple of years ago as an investor, it was a pretty fragmented landscape, and you weren't quite sure how the business would form. And a lot of the companies raising money were not very professional. It's become much more professional. I think in Europe, looking around, there's a sense that a lot of the operators here are bringing a very high level of professionalism right from the get-go. I think that also looking at this market from a U.S. operator's perspective and investor's perspective, we've seen now twice what has happened in the cannabis industries in Canada and in the United States, going from some talk and building up to a groundswell of support to an industry built. And I think that looking at the Europe market, there's no question that the same thing is going to happen here. So investors are going to be looking at this market with a certain degree of patience, and they're also bringing capital that has already been made in other markets from cannabis activity. So there's a degree of confidence that companies and operators and investors are going to have looking at the market here. And I think it bodes very well for operators here looking to raise money and looking for partners, and also for investors looking for opportunities here.
Excellent.
I could just add that I see the potential of CBD right now as the 2000 investment opportunity where we had the bubble. So right now in Europe we are still very premature, and if you look at the US companies or some interesting CBD companies, they start from the seed all the way down to the selling of the product. And I would rather invest in a US kind of deal where they grow seeds in whatever state, I don't want to name any, compared to Syria, not Syria, but compared to some European countries.
Definitely Syria.
No.
So let me take a quick poll here. CBD seems to be a pretty hot topic here. You guys are all operators or investors in the sector. Who here operates a business or invests in a business that is THC only? Hands? Wow. And CBD only? THC and CBD? Okay. Very cool. So let's segue into a question right now about investing in CBD. And so Henry started us off. David, you've obviously made not just an investment, but you're also putting in additional resources, your mind share into essentially CBD by way of your investment in Bang and others. What's your take right now on CBD relative to sort of other investments in the space?
I view CBD to be one aspect of the cannabis plant. I think that the cannabis plant is where the vast, where the potential is for this industry. Is the whole plant, all the cannabinoids, and I think that THC is a big part of that. But we have to, of course, deal with the regulatory realities, and I think that CBD is available now, and there is a quicker regulatory pathway to CBD being widely available, and I think that's where the market's following now. But from a personal perspective, I think that the demand for THC is actually underestimated as well. And we're not talking about necessarily high THC, people getting stoned, but there is something to being home in the afternoon if you're a housewife and cleaning up the laundry, or a house husband, and have a little bit of THC to make it interesting, right? Where we're not talking about getting stoned. So I think that this whole plant offers a lot of possibilities.
So I have a personal take on this. So I have two ancillary businesses that work synergistically together. And the Farm Bill, rocked our world. It gave us a much bigger, for instance, with Bud.com, instead of delivering in California and then going and setting up partners and framework in Massachusetts and then doing that in Florida, in the states that allow within those fragmented sort of regulations. Now we can go ahead and ship CBD next day air, basically globally. It upped our addressable market immeasurably. So when over 99% of the people go to our site, Bud.com, I generally can't deliver them cannabis unless they live in these parts of California. And so all of a sudden it's changed the game. There are a lot of companies for whom this has happened. So again, as a professional investor, Joel, what do you see with CBD?
Well, I mean, as a professional investor, right? I mean, I'm always focused on managing downside risk, right? It's like if everything goes well, we make a profit, fantastic. But what happens when it doesn't go well? And so, from a cultivation standpoint with THC, I was never pro cultivation because you have jurisdictional risk. You're limited to one state, and if you buy a license in Washington and look at the pricing in Washington, you can't do anything else with that license. So, CBD has a whole lot of really interesting opportunities simply because you can cultivate it here, make a brand here, and then ship it in a whole lot of different areas. So, our focus has now been things that don't have that kind of jurisdictional risk, from equipment companies that manufacture machines to, we have an ethanol company. One of the companies I started is called Vitalis, which manufactures extraction machines. We make those in Canada and we ship them all over the world. So, that's really been a big important part of our thesis is just not having that jurisdictional risk, which is exciting to see.
So Joel, your one of your big plays is a hardware manufacturer, right? So it's extraction equipment. What percentage of that equipment do you think is being used to extract CBD?
A huge amount of it. I mean, the interesting part for us is we used to buy extraction equipment and we had this machine over here and a different one over there. And, I just fundamentally believe that if you're investing in brands, you need the same extraction methodology. There needs to be consistency of that brand. When you go to a Starbucks or a McDonald's, it's the same espresso machine, the same cash register, it's consistency of that experience. If you get a license to brew Budweiser, they don't tell you to just go out and buy whatever equipment you want. It's exactly what they need so that it's the same in every market. And so, when we started Vitalis, it was just so that we had a standardized platform for everything. And then we started making really big equipment. We started making that for the CBD markets, but now we're starting to see, CO2 extraction machines that are a whole facility that can do multiple tons a day. So, that's been an incredible pace. It's just in the scale of some of these facilities and the amount of biomass that they have to get through.
What I think that speaks to the fact that CBD is just driving tons of volume and growth. It just flat out is. We also run a hardware business where we make pre-rolls with a patented tech that does that. And the scale to which right now our addressable market has grown for that, they wouldn't have built the CO2 machines without CBD driving that, right? That's what the volume is. So the other interesting thing is what CBD has done is it's brought folks in that were averse to THC for whatever reason, regulatory, because part of the psychoactive, you work with their model. But an investor like Henry, who has invested broadly in different verticals, now finds himself in this room because of CBD. So, very interesting.
Yeah, I just want to add that I am from background medical doctor, and I never really liked the toxic part of the THC, and now we have a non-toxic product available which can be used in multiple ways. And we already got approached by one of our own energy drinks that people months ago or half a year ago asked us if we had a problem to put CBD in the drink. And that's how we got aware of, wow, wait a minute, that's interesting. So that's just one part of it.
Interesting.
So can I just ask, when you said the toxic part of THC,
Yeah. What?
Okay.
Thanks for bringing that up and clarifying. So moving past the sort of CBD, it's hard to. It's gotten so big, but it's only one component of this space. And generally, when we talk about CBD, just like when we talk about cannabis, it still breaks out to: is it hardware? Is it software? Is it flower? Is it cultivation? Is it packaging? So right now, the question to investors on the panel is narrowing down what are the types of verticals, what products, what within the space is right now sort of most lucrative, what looks best for investors. Go ahead.
So, my perspective on investing in this industry is that there's so much white space and so much opportunity. And this doesn't only go for investors, it goes for operators, for anybody launching a business. There's so much opportunity all over the place. And in order to succeed, you need to have a measure of focus. And whether it's a certain area that you're focused in or a certain market or what, you need to have a lane. Because if you're just looking for the next opportunity, you just won't, it's just too much. So the way I've looked at it is I've tried to become an expert in companies that make and sell cannabis products. And I don't really look at any of the other ancillary verticals. Not that there's not a lot of opportunities there, of course there are, but I focused in that area. And within that particular area, at least in the US, I've seen a trend. I wrote a white paper in September of 2018. I spoke about this in Berlin called the Green Regulatory Arbitrage, a case for investing in U.S. multi-state vertically integrated cannabis companies. And that set out the history of where I think of prohibition, where I think legalization is headed, and my thesis for investing in, at the time, multi-state cannabis operators. I think those are still great investment opportunities in the United States, but I think that brands in the United States are where the real winners are going to be. The multi-state operators, some of them are going to develop brands, but the reason why lately my personal investment focus has turned to brands and why I've joined Bang to help them with global initiatives is because this is a CPG industry. Nobody really cares, where it was grown or who grows it. Some kind of stores might, but most people don't. And they are buying a product, a CPG finished product, and they want it, I think, in many times from a credible brand. Bang is one of the first cannabis companies in the United States, founded in 2010. The company has navigated all of the challenges of existing in the U.S. cannabis industry for 10 years to go public in the next couple of weeks. And I think if you're looking at investment opportunities, look for brands that have traction, have stood the test of time, and have the potential to become, in the case of the U.S., national brands, or as our ambitions are, to be a global brand.
So interesting. So CPGs, brands, manufacturers, essentially. I think Joel's got a different strategy, and also it should be noted that brands are right now. I think it's a little prohibitive in Canada. So
Non-existent? Yeah.
something like that, one would say.
Yeah.
But yeah. So what's your sort of
First and foremost for us is always, people, the management team is the first thing we look at. But ultimately, whether you're looking to make an investment or if you're looking to receive investment, look on the other side of just the cash, right? Like, what else can you bring to the table? What else does that company need? Do they have the right people to actually execute the strategy? In the early days of Canada, it was like, oh, we have a license, and then the values would go up. I think, that's come to a grinding halt. Now you actually have to be able to execute a business plan and make that important stuff called profit. And a lot of the Canadian companies forgot to do that. But for us, it's always about what if we're negotiating on a deal and the infrastructure that we already have can really help the company we're investing in. Our money's not the same color, right? Like, we can make the investment, we can get the operating capital, but we can also provide them with, be it our global network of supply people on the equipment side, if it's another equipment company, or, if it was a brand, if we can introduce them to our licensed processors who all have the same machine, right? We can invest in a brand, introduce them to our clients, and globally get them into legal markets with partners who all have the same extraction machine. Here are the SOPs, and that gives the brand an unfair advantage. So it's good for the brand, it's good for our investment, and it's also good for the people who own our machines. So it's full transparency. It really is a win-win-win. So it makes us a very good partner for our what we call our ecosystem. So that's really what we're focused on now.
Super important to focus. Just to focus, I think the overarching. If you talk to investors, there is so much out there. that you can't really dive in and understand a space sort of at a banal level if you're not entrenched. Henry, you have some insight there?
No, I totally agree what the two gentlemen said before. So I'm just in the learning process. I'm very excited about this new opportunity here for the CBD investment. But I agree to what everybody else said before. So there's nothing that I can add.
I think you'll be focusing on CBD.
Yeah, well, not with all the cash, but I would definitely consider an investment now.
So, sort of back real quick on CBD, but touching on the regulatory component, just because David sitting here has some very interesting color, working essentially with Senate committees. I'd love for you to sort of share some of what you see, because that will absolutely impact, the investment landscape. Right now, it's a big open question. What are you seeing? And please also describe what capacity you're working with folks.
So the white paper that I mentioned before, which was published on new cannabis ventures, was read across the world and also in the U.S. Congress, and got me invited to join the U.S. Senate Cannabis Working Group and the U.S. House Cannabis Working Group. So I'm in D.C. twice a month in these two working groups, which are members of their congressional staffers working on drafting and crafting federal cannabis legislation and trying to get more support for it in the U.S. Congress. And we worked through a whole bunch of issues on the cannabis side, on the THC and CBD side, and more broadly speaking, from legalization of cannabis, I very much agree with Congressman Rohrbacher's view this morning, and frankly, the whole industry and worldwide owes a debt of gratitude to him. The Rohrbacher Farr Amendment is the single most important piece of cannabis legislation, period, in the world. So I think that I agree with him that it's moving forward quickly in Congress. There's a lot of activity behind the scenes in the U.S. Congress. The Safe Banking Act is very likely, it appears, going to pass. I think they'll have it this summer. And that's going to advance the industry very, very significantly. When banks like JP Morgan, Bank of America, Citibank are banking the industry, it's going to become normalized quite quickly. On the CBD side, at a recent meeting, there was a discussion that Mitch McConnell, who is the second most powerful person in the United States after the president, the Senate Majority Leader, he was largely responsible for getting the Farm Bill passed at the end of 2018. That the Farm Bill removed hemp from the CSA. It's no longer a drug, it's now an agricultural product. Senator McConnell used a lot of his political capital, and a lot of his key supporters in Kentucky were pushing to get the Farm Bill in place, and he got it done, a monumental accomplishment in the Congress. But now the FDA has effectively put the brakes on it and said, no, you can't put CBD in food. The claims, of course, they need to police that. You can't add it to it, you can't market or sell it as a dietary supplement. So they've stymied the industry. There's this massive demand, and the FDA has stepped in. And the Congress, I think, is frustrated with that. They're not happy with that. And the FDA has said things like, has indicated that they want Congress to legislate some more about hemp, about how CBD can be added to food. And I think Congress's perspective is that, no, you FDA are an agency charged with doing this, and the messaging that it should take 4 years is unacceptable. And the FDA regulates drugs and alcohol, which kill people every day, yet are sold every single day. CBD is at worst not helpful, right? At worst. So if you look at the upside and the downside of it, right? The downside versus the upside, the FDA should be able to, within, I'd say, 6 months, figure out how this can be brought to market in a sensible way with dosage limitations potentially, but we're not dealing with something that's dangerous here. So Congress is actively looking at forcing the FDA to move forward quickly, including through appropriations measures and other measures. So I think that don't be too pessimistic about the progress of CBD food in food in the United States. I think that there's going to be progress there soon too.
Yeah, well, I agree with 100% of what you're saying, and the logic there is undeniable. You know, those barriers can, you know, have created a ton of opportunity. There's certainly things that you have to watch out for, and you know, there's state by state, or you know, the differing rules in Switzerland to Denmark to wherever, you know, around potencies of CBD, potencies of THC, you know, different allowable limits, etc. I mean, there's great opportunity if you know how to navigate that. You know, as soon as safe banking comes in and when the farm bill is totally cleared out, that's also going to bring in a whole lot more competition, both on the capital side, but you know, also on the production side. So you know, once there's lending and people can build much bigger farms and get mortgage rates, and you know, you're not having to go out and work as hard as everyone in this room has worked to build the businesses that they have. You know, there's a whole lot more scale, a whole lot more production, which is going to drive prices down. And so there's a great opportunity right now, but you know, you still have to make sure that there's a plan for the price compression that is coming.
So no doubt, I'll say as an operator, you know, clearly having just more readily access to the big banks, as far as, you know, funding is one thing, thanks to you. But for us, you know, having a business with 120 employees, they're paid out in cash weekly, is asinine. It's beyond asinine. And we have a person that counts money. That's that person's job. And so the efficiencies that are going to come from that, my friend, it's hard to even sort of put into words. Yeah, they're just, it's rough operating right now. So I think it will smooth things, not just with access to capital, but man, like normalize operations. And that's the crazy thing in California, where we're the, you know, 5th largest economy in the world. We're the largest cannabis market in the world, and we get bank accounts closed, you know? So, and right now our industry is hiring more than any other industry in our state, no doubt. So interesting things, and I think in all of them, absolutely opportunity lies, right? So I don't know where we're at, but generally this is a panel that elicits tons of questions. So I want to go ahead and take it out.
I'm right here.
Let's go.
Let's hear it for the panel one more time.
Hi, Dean. Thanks for sharing your experience there on the archaicness of the banking system. My name is Graham DeBar. I'm from Ireland, a product called Festi, which is like a cryptocurrency payment system, basically, and data system. So would you be looking towards cryptocurrency as an alternative method of, I suppose, having a diversified asset class in your companies?
So I think it's been looked at a lot, obviously because of out of necessity, and it's sort of an option. I think a lot of folks have taken the view that, you know, 2 negatives don't make a positive. We're already sort of in a difficult industry, and so now sort of poking the bear a little bit more and saying, hey, we're going to use this sort of off the charts method of you know, taking in our funds. That's why you haven't seen it. It's because it's the bigger players don't think that potentially it's a great look for the regulators right now that we're trying to convince to let us bank. But you guys have any insight onto that? I know I've been asked that question.
I mean, I've taken a look at a ton of them, from PopPay, Greencoin, a whole bunch of them. And if someone could, if someone could bring me a paper that basically, like the KYC side of this, like anti-money laundering approval, that this would be okay to process cannabis payments that way, I'm in all day long. It solves a huge problem. No one's been able to prove that. So, you know, I'm with you there, like 2 wrongs don't make a right. It's a huge problem. That's an interesting solution, but I don't think it's quite there yet for me personally.
Any solutions get a look right now, but I think that's where, like, long term, folks are sort of holding, because we do think that things are coming in the summer.
From my perspective, I agree with everything that's been said. I think that blockchain in the cannabis industry is interesting, and IBM is doing a partnership with a company called Wasabi to build blockchain to cover the entire Canadian cannabis industry now. Anytime that I see crypto in a cannabis deck, I usually stop reading. Not because there's anything wrong with crypto, but just to the point that Dean made, I think it's too much. It's a leap too far to take both of these leaps in one shot.
Are there other questions? There's got to be more questions.
You got a question?
I probably have a question. Let's talk about this crypto thing. I mean, like, does it work in general? Crypto? I mean, I know that's not totally a cannabis
Yes,
question,
it does
but like,
work.
I mean,
Yes.
Bitcoin works, yeah.
people count it as. Does it though?
Yes.
Like, what's to stop the government from shutting down all your Bitcoin? What's to stop somebody from
Decentralized.
mysteriously dying with your Bitcoin
They're
wallet?
shutting down banks, it's decentralized.
Well, I think that the difference I see between crypto and cannabis is that two things. And cannabis is very easy to understand, and it's the demand is proven for it, right? Those two things, right? Those are two things that we don't have with crypto. I don't think that we
Can't
understand this.
smoke, no crypto.
There's a strain called kryptonite, isn't there?
I don't actually have a question, I just also wanted to mention the cut down on costs that you were talking about earlier with counting money, and also the fact that you need right now armored vehicles to move your cash flow rather than online banking system.
Well, so actually, it's so the nuance sucks, but what's worse is you're risking lives doing this. So people will be killed. In Oakland, which is a huge cannabis hub in California, there are the crime it's a big issue. We've had our facility broken into. Most of our neighbors, most big brands in California deal with this, and it's no fun. So it's not just about the nuisance. It's about like we're putting our friends and employees in danger. It's not a good thing.
Related to that is that you walk into a dispensary and there's security and guns and cameras, and it's all because it's driven by cash.
Fair enough. Well, I mean, what can people do though? Like, you can lobby the federal government, I suppose, but that's so
I think we're
successful.
doing it.
The Safe Banking Act is going to resolve that. I mean, I don't think that this time next year, we're gonna be having the same conversation. And that's why even companies in the cannabis space that are, I think, the closest to this issue, that have been processing payments for cannabis companies, are really ramping down their operations in anticipation of having regular banks get involved.
Well, I think there was a point earlier, we did one of the questions, we talked about the biggest differences in the US and Europe, and I think that the maturity and the fact that you come out without this sort of prevalent black market, and obviously there are pockets in, Barcelona, and, that's there, the culture's there, but the business is growing up basically like ground up, legal, mature.
And there were a lot of deals that we looked at in the US, which would have been fantastic investments, but, for me to jump on a plane and go and pick up a hockey bag every month is just not an option, right? So we had to pass on them, but, the track record that was talked about, the European landscape is going to be very, very interesting. I mean, the borderless nature of the EU is very interesting. There's so much opportunity here, so, yeah.
I was just gonna say that I think the most, another compelling part for the government to sign on to the Safe Banking Act is also the aspect of money laundering and how dealing with cash, facilitates it more easily.
Well, we have, the funky thing is that, someone used funky earlier, it's a German word.
It is a German word.
But there are different components to it. I just lost my train of thought.
It's after lunch.
Money laundering.
Okay. So, usually the connotations with cash are like, hey, it's cash, you can sock it away, that's not true though in our case. everything is run through track and trace and through our books. So all the benefits of cash money are not there in this industry. It's literally just the nuance of carrying fucking bags with you of places and to pay to pay our taxes with bags of cash, our excise taxes, hundreds of thousands of dollars. So
Let me just make one more point about the CBD point from before. As the FDA looks at companies and looks at this more closely, and I think that for sure the same thing will happen in Europe. The companies that won't be targets for the FDA and will succeed in the industry are ones that follow meticulous QA standards and have detailed labels and dot all the I's, cross all the T's, follow all the rules to a T. And in the US, we have GRAS notifications and various ways, but in the EU, you have probably equal, if not stricter regulation around food safety. So I would encourage anyone in the space looking at the food category, but just in general, the CBD vaping technology and all those areas to be meticulous about all the things that you think you should be meticulous about, because it'll be to your advantage as this industry becomes more and more regulated. And let me just say one thing to that point. I think that what we've seen it in Canada with a company like Kronos, so we've seen it in the US with other companies that are able to navigate this regulatory landscape and comply with it are the ones that succeed. And otherwise, you just can't succeed in California. We've seen it over and over again. So it's just important to be very attuned to that. A company like ours has done this for a decade. It's very, very well suited to do it. We've seen all the shifts, but be careful, pay attention to that.
So here's a question. What did you need to do to be able to stomach investing in a company that right now is, has all these sort of regulatory issues? Because you're the guy that you like CPGs, so these are all plant touching. What was that process like?
Well, I think that if you look at any investment, right, any investment is a balance of risk versus reward. Right, on one side there's risk, the other side there's reward. On the reward side of this industry and of cannabis products is known. We're all here in this room because we know that the demand for this product is massive. It's underreported and it's going to be tremendous when it's regular, normal way product. So you look at the reward is known. On the risk side, I think the illegality is what the risk is, and it's not, in my view, a real risk. It's just a question of time. There's no question the U.S. will decriminalize, reschedule, legalize cannabis federally. There's no question about it. And in my view, there's no question about it in Germany and Switzerland and places like that too. Because once we do it, the single convention will have to be revised, and we're the ones who caused this mess. So when we dig ourselves out of the mess that prohibition has been, the rest of the world, I think, will follow suit over time. So I think that the perceived risk of investing in cannabis products is large, but it's not an actual risk. And that was the title of my white paper, The Green Regulatory Arbitrage. That's what this is. It's an arbitrage. It's a mismatch in value because of this artificial fear that's been created. And fear is where there's lots of money to be made.
We're running out of time, but is the fear really artificial? I mean, people go to jail, people go to prison.
Well, there hasn't been a raid in the United States since 2016 on a cannabis producing company. The reason for that is because even though an individual...
maybe not a federal raid, but there's still states, San Diego has a raid.
It's not a federal raid. There hasn't been a federal raid or a seizure on a cannabis company since the end of 2016. If anyone knows of an instance, please tell me.
Well, it's not federal, but there definitely have been raids. But look, I think the point being here is, I think you went in and you assessed, and the risk relative to the reward, and clearly you made your decision. I'm an investor. I've invested a lot of my own money into my businesses, and we saw the same thing. So please don't see me as a complainer about bags of cash. I'm just talking about that as it's a nuance, and obviously there are efficiencies to be gained. But it's an amazing market in California. We actually make profit. We've been selling a lot of weed. So,
Amen.
On that note,
I think we're done.
all right.
Let's hear it again.